Hello and welcome to TGC. I'm Zach Shrivers here to talk to you about the City of Athens Geographic Information System, otherwise known as the GIS. The GIS can be accessed on the city's website under City Maps and GIS. The GIS is a tool for layering different kinds of maps on top of each other so that one can see where different resources are located. The GIS can also inform you about the value of parcels in the city, what their property taxes are, and other property information. Here to talk about some of the practical uses of GIS is the city planner, Paul Logue.
There's a few ways that they can utilize it on a general basis that is applicable specifically to their property or to information they might want as a resident or a citizen of Athens. The first of which is the Parcel Data, which is available through the Athens County Auditor's GIS website. Through that you can get all kinds of information about the size of a piece of land, what the current use of that piece of real estate is. So is it residential, is it multi-unit residential, is it a commercial project or a business, a retail type project, or a academic use or a religious use. You can also understand or find out what the taxes are for a piece of property, your property taxes, what the property most recently sold for. You can see the history of a piece of real estate, adjoining property owners, some information about utilities and road access. You can also see soils and slope through contours, find out where your voting locations are, all kinds of things like that. Now we also have a city GIS website that is hosted through the Voinovich School. That has a lot of that same information on it. We also have additional road layers, city voting wards, voting precincts, locations for voting, and the flood maps, which are really important to a lot of people, so you can understand the relationship between the Hocking River floodplain and your property, which can have an impact on how you develop a piece of real estate. And also has insurance costs added to it. So if a piece of real estate is in the 100-year floodplain and you're going to develop it, and with that development you have to have a bank loan or a mortgage secured against the real estate, then as a general rule you are required to carry flood insurance, and that can have a significant cost to it. For example, a single family home in the floodplain on the east side of Athens, depending on the property value, they might have a flood insurance cost anywhere from $800 to a couple $1,000s. So all of that information is available to the public. We can also provide at the city level. I have additional GIS software that we have access to that on a case-by-case basis we can try to help people out with some small site planning and provide a little bit more information. Most of the conversations I have with people usually are around questions of flood mapping. From a mapping standpoint, it's really useful to, of course, start with looking at the zoning, which is also available on the city's website. So the zoning will tell you what you can or cannot do on a piece of real estate. For example, in a single-family residential zone, you can't have a duplex or a multi-unit residential. You typically cannot do most commercial uses as well. In a manufacturing zone, you can do all kinds of things, but you can't build residential. So looking at the zoning will give you a lot of information about what you're allowed to do on property or what you're not allowed to do on property. You can also get information about the slope. There's some basic information about access to roads, some utility information about where water lines are and where sewer lines are, so you at least have some general information about that. And then there's a general slope, or not slope, but general site work that most people would want to know, like the size of a piece of land, so you can figure out what size building you can put on there. Also whether you can subdivide it into smaller pieces of land so you can have multiple building sites. You can get soil information so you can better understand whether you have any foundation issue, whether you might expect some foundation issues, or if there's a very steep slope on it, whether you have to do additional engineering. You can understand stormwater runoff a little bit better. And you can also get a lot of information about floodplain development, which also has additional requirements added to it. We typically call it, historically, before there was computer-aided geographic information, planners and architects and real estate people, they would use what we called overlays. And that was usually you'd have this table that had lighting underneath it, and you would have these transparent pieces of plastic, I guess would be, I'm not sure what the actual term is, but you'd have these transparent pages that each page would have different information on it. And then so you would overlay on top of each other the different layers, and that would show you, and that would give you a complete picture, or at least the information you want. So one layer would just have, for example, contour lines. A second layer might have parcel lines on it. A third layer might tell you where utilities are. And so you put all those together, and then you can get a really good picture for the piece of property that you're looking at and what you can do with it. The identifying function, because you've got all those layers on there, right? And so you would choose, each layer isn't just showing you information, but there's also backing information that'll give you some more details about it. So for example, if you have a layer, if you're looking at that parcel layer, and I kind of default to the parcel layer because I find that that's usually most of the information people want to know is on the parcel layer. So if you're looking at the Athens County parcel layer and you click on a piece, you'll be able to get information about just by playing around, how big the piece of real estate is, etc. But then you can go into a lot more detail about the information's not, you just have to make a few clicks. It'll tell you who owns it, when they bought it, how much they paid for it, what the property taxes are, what it's used for. You can find information about how recently things were constructed or what type of improvements have happened. School district information, whether it's within the city limits or within a village or within an unincorporated area, what township it's in, whether they're paying into a volunteer fire department or whether they're paying city taxes. There's all of that information you can get pretty easy. If you look at the contour data, which is just a bunch of lines, lines that tell you changes in elevation. You can click on a specific line and it'll tell you what elevation that is relative to sea level. So you can see how quickly it goes from, say, 655 feet in elevation to 650. And you can tell whether, by looking at how close those lines are next to each other, you can tell whether you've got a really steep slope or whether you've got a long, shallow floodplain. So that type of information is extremely helpful to somebody who's looking to do something.
The GIS features aerial photographs which are labeled Aerial Photo 3-inch and Aerial Photo 6-inch. Paul Logue says the difference between the two is their level of detail.
Yeah, so that's a question of the level of detail that you get into and just how fine you can zoom in on something and see it before it gets blurry. The 3-inch is a really fine view. I've seen in some parts of Athens where you can identify the make and model of a car. I was able to actually pick out my own vehicle in a parking lot. I mean, it was at my office, but I was able to tell which car was mine based on that. As you zoom out, or as you get from the 3-inch to the 6-inch, you might see the car looks blurry at about 200 feet or 300 feet, but at the 3-inch, you might see that the car is actually in pretty crisp definition, so you can tell a lot more information about it. The ortho, we call those ortho photos. Most people just call it probably a bird's eye photo or something like that. Those are really helpful, so you can see a lot of information just by looking at those. You can see depressions in the land where water might gather, so you can see wetlands. You can delineate those type of things. You can some of those 3-inch photos. You can see potholes. You can tell where curbs have been damaged. You can also see it's a good snapshot of a certain situation. So you can actually, like going back to cars, you can tell how many cars might be parked in a certain parking lot on an average day. You could also see, if you're looking at Court Street or something, you can tell that there are parking spaces available on Court Street, and how many might be available at any given minute. and you can also see what's going on with a piece of property. So from a code inspection aspect or something, or from a permitting aspect, you might be able to tell if somebody built something that they weren't permitted to do, which is tough to, it's tough to keep track of everything sometimes, but you could tell if somebody built a garage or a shed. You can also overlay that information with the parcel data and those other things, so you can really better understand what's going on out there. Our most recent ortho photo was flown. You have to fly it, and it's not cheap to do that. We worked in the City of Athens, Athens County Auditor, Ohio University, and there may have been one or two other stakeholders, possibly Wayne National Forest or Ohio Department of Natural Resources. I don't recall now, but there's a handful of us pulled in some money to get a really detailed ortho photo flown. The state of Ohio has a GIS arrangement set up where the state set up a contract, I believe, with one or two GIS companies to handle the whole state, and so they were able to bring costs down because they knew that they were leveraging for all 88 counties, and so then they provided you a menu of options for what they were going to do or what they could do for each county, and then you had the choice of choosing from that menu. So we worked. There's a few stakeholders that pulled in money. I believe that most recent shape or ortho photo was flown, I think, in either 2013 or 2014, and was provided to us about a year later, because there's a lot of post-processing that they have to do to get that information and clear it up. You're basically stitching over a whole bunch of photographs all together, and so that takes a while to process that. But the imagery on it right now is, it's, to me at least, it's really amazing just to see the clarity that we've had over time. And it's also looking at those layers over time, and those images really helps give us information about development patterns, about changes to our landscape. A lot of other people can utilize that information, of course, so if somebody wants to understand better about changes to tree cover, that information's on there. Stormwater information, some of it information right now, and sometimes you want to see an ortho photo that has a lot of greenery on it, tree cover, so that would help. But also there's having a ortho photo when the leaves are down can tell you a lot of information about the landscape that you can't see when the leaves are in full bloom.
Paul addresses how often the ortho photos are updated and when the next one will be uploaded.
Usually they come every few years, so I would bet at least probably about 3 more years at the earliest. Now there's other ortho photos that are taking place out there. U.S. Geological Survey, they do some flying. Some of that information is available. Google Earth is a pretty good aggregator, or Google Maps, of all of the imagery that's available, because those are public records once they're created. You know, if the city owns an ortho photo, that is a public record. If the United States Geological Survey or the National Forest Service or somebody does the same thing, that's public information, and so if anybody wants to utilize that they have that. So there's a lot of good online tools where you can see different ortho photos of the Athens area. I would recommend checking out the USGS. The Wayne National or the National Forest Service also does, and then there's a few others, but the cities is pretty good as well as the counties too.
Recently, EMH&T were working in the city of Athens to add additional data to the GIS.
They are doing some detailed information about our underground utilities in the uptown area. So I believe they're going to be looking at our stormwater functions, our sanitary sewer functions, and our public water utilities. And so that'll provide a lot of information to our Public Works Department for projects down the road, as well as what for developers who wanting to hook up to something. We'll have information about the size of water lines, the size of sewer lines, the size of storm lines, and then also the location for possible hookups. And we can learn a little bit more about the depth of things if we're doing repair work, and that should help us with some of our projects.
After Paul Logue spoke so much about inclines and such, TGC asked if there were any 3D effects in GIS.
Yes, but not with the software suite that we utilize, at least that I utilize. There are advanced ways to do that. There's probably some, if somebody were really interested and wanted to learn a lot about GIS, there's probably some free software suites online that can do some of that data crunching for you. I've actually had some pretty good success using Google Earth and Google Maps for that. Google Earth especially has some really good three-dimensional layers that you can import. It's kind of luck of the draw as to what areas of the world Google Earth has really good 3D on, but it seems like it's getting better every day. There's a lot of areas of Google Earth where you can get three-dimensional building footprints that show scale heights of buildings, especially in larger cities. And there's a lot of practical implications of having that information at your fingertips. And Google Earth is a free software suite you can download online.
If you have questions about the GIS, you can contact Paul Logue in the mayor's office at 740-592-3338. The GIS is found on the city's website at www.ci.athens.oh.us/GIS. I'm Zach Shrivers, and thank you for tuning in to TGC.